You're listening to the Philly Young Adults Podcast.
Welcome back to the Philly Young Adults Podcast and another edition of Bible Study Basics. And we are going through the letters to the churches in Revelation chapter 2 and 3. And I have a squeaky chair today. If you can hear that in the back. We're back, the three of us, Dan, Jim, and myself. What's up, guys?
Hi.
Yo.
Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you.
Hey, yeah, good to have you back, James. And we only did one letter without you, so you didn't miss too much.
You did two without me when I was sick.
Well, technically, Dan, we did one letter without you and one introduction.
Oh, you're right.
Without
That's
you.
true. Good point.
But we're all here today, and that's what matters. Tommy's behind the glass, keeping us honest.
Hi, Tommy.
And we're down to the last two letters to the churches in Revelation. And once again, go back and listen to the others if you haven't had an opportunity to. But I was just thinking before we came on here today that, and guys, you correct me if this is a wrong thought.
You're wrong.
But I'm just going to put it out there, I think when you look at these last two letters that are held up before us, Philadelphia today, which we'll look at, and Laodicea, the last, it's almost like here's these last two, and one being not perfect, but this great model of what a faithful church should look like. And then the other almost being like a polar opposite of what a maybe not faithless, but just a failing in faith church looks like. So these last two letters just being held before us, and there's additional things I think we can look to apply to our lives and the church life. But it's interesting, maybe that's no coincidence. You kind of see this final contrast as we finish the letters.
Yeah, and a lot of people view the letters in the churches to the churches here as like stages in church history, and so some will point out like in the last days there will be a great falling away, which would be kind of similar to what's happening there in Laodicea in that they've cooled very much so. Not nearly as faithful to what the Lord has called us to. And, so I don't know how much is to that, but it's just something people...
And along with that, maybe the church in Philadelphia being a picture of the faithfulness of the church through the ages, where, missionaries going out and people being saved, and potentially it's interesting stuff to think about. But as we like to do, before we read the letter, we like to consider some of the history of these places. And Philadelphia is not 13500 Philmont Avenue, not that Philadelphia.
Founded by William Penn.
Yeah.
In what year, Daniel?
1862.
1682.
That's what I meant. I was joking it the whole time, and I messed it up by one moment.
Who was a proponent for religious tolerance, as the AI of Google tells us.
So
Excellent.
in case you didn't know, our city of Philadelphia does have its roots in this Greek name here. But the ancient city of Philadelphia, what do we know, guys? Anything about this ancient city?
Very little. I did not do my homework in regards to the history of Philadelphia here. We do know something that it was one of the latest churches or cities established as opposed to the other six that we've talked about, or five that we've talked about, one more that we will talk about, right? I believe that this was the last founded city. I think they have some other things related to Greek culture with it.
Yeah, it seems to be culturally, it was like a missionary leap pad for Hellenism for Greeks. So, which is an interesting parallel. There's the cultural sharing of faith, I guess you could say, but then here's a call for a spiritual calling of stepping through that open door and sharing.
It is interesting when you look at how the nature of some of the things going on culturally or historically in these cities reflects spiritually what's going on. Not to, get into the weeds in that too much, but the last letter we looked at how Sardis was this, impenetrable fortress of a city that ended up being destroyed and conquered a couple of times because of their overconfidence, and that reflected their spiritual state. And here, maybe, we see this culturally, this small city that had big influence in, getting out the Greek language to surrounding areas, was able to have a big impact spiritually, even though they're referred to as being little in strength. We might call it poor in spirit, but honored by the Lord in a great way.
Yeah, and Josh, what I think is interesting with that point too is then a characteristic of Jesus fixes every problem, or is a direction for them to think about, because all of these letters start with a description of Jesus back from chapter 1, and that connects also to, here he has the keys to the door. There's always something then about God's characteristics that will then help you push past that as well.
I think that's one of the things, studying through these letters again recently, that I think is really cool to look at, just as far as, and it helps to unlock the meaning of some of these letters. When you look at, in the beginning of every letter, as you're saying, Dan, Jesus gives this description of himself, very specific to what's going on in their church, either as an encouragement or as a rebuke, or just as a remembrance, like, hey, look at me, remember this about my nature. You've either forgotten it, or you just need to be reassured of this thing that you know about me. I think it's kind of cool when you analyze how he describes himself to all these churches related to what they're going through.
Yeah.
So let's read this one today. Gentlemen, one of you guys want to take it? Revelation chapter 3, it's verses 7 through 13. All right, Jim, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I would love to. Verse 7, and to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world, to try those who dwell on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it. And I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
Excellent, Jim. Thanks.
One thing that seems apparent about this church, despite the fact that Jesus says of them, it's probably not a negative thing. He says in verse 8 that they have little strength. But when you go through this letter, you could probably pick out at least like 5 or 6 ways he commends them. And like the letter to Smyrna, there is no criticism given by Jesus to this church. And one of the things that stands out to me after you read that, Jim, is in verse 11, he says, behold, I am coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. So just, that to me is Jesus is acknowledging that they have this eternal mindset, right? That they are looking ahead to that crown in heaven. And he says, hold fast to that. Like, keep enduring, keep persevering, keep having that mindset. And it's a challenge to me personally. And I think how many days, now they were going through a challenge here where they were, using the eternity as a comfort, but how many days am I thinking about that reward ahead of me, to help me persevere through, or that crown waiting in heaven. We hear about a few different crowns that might be rewarded to saints in heaven one day. But what a cool just commendation by the Lord, just speaking to how they are living their faith, and what an encouragement this must have been to them.
Yeah, and with that too, each of these letters, Jesus refers back to himself, like you made note of earlier, in specific ways. And in this one, he says that these are the words of the Holy One, the True One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. We see Christ throughout the gospel characterized as the true light of the world, the true bread of heaven, the true shepherd, the true vine. He's the fullness and perfect realization of God in our midst, in truth and in holiness, and something to make note of, be ye holy, for I am holy, he says, and there is no holiness apart from truth, right? And so there's all sorts of falsehoods that swirl around us in terms of ideas and what it is to be this or that, and he's saying to the church in Philadelphia and then down through the ages unto us that don't forget that the words I'm communicating to you are from the only Holy One and the truth, you know, and hold fast to those things.
Yeah, and maybe for them, maybe like we can, facing challenges or some level of persecution in our lives, maybe some of them were starting to question, is this whole holiness life worth it, right? Like what I'm trying to stand up for here is really being challenged. Maybe they're being mocked or criticized. We hear about the synagogue of Satan, the Jews, those who say they're Jews and are not. And we look at this and think like maybe they just needed that reminder, like, yeah, keep going. It's worth it, right? It's worth it to pursue that holy life because maybe, you guys listening could think of being in a scenario either at work or with unsaved friends or people who would mock you for being the Christian guy or the Bible guy or seeking to live that life that is full of holiness and truth. It's not always the most popular thing to do, and it may not have been super popular for them. So Jesus is reminding them, hey, you know what? Maybe it's not popular, but it's good. Why? Because they're seeking to emulate him as the one who's perfectly true and perfectly holy.
And they've been doing the works, right? He says in verse 8, I know your works, compared to the church in Sardis, who he also says, I know your works, that you have a reputation of being alive, but you're dead. And because they've been doing the work, he gives them an open door that nobody then can shut. So he gives them more to do because they've already been obeying him, keeping his word. And even though, you might feel like you have little power, maybe that's exactly what they did. Maybe they were a small church. But that doesn't matter because the Lord has given them an opportunity that they can step into. And he's like, hey, I know what you guys have been doing. So here's another opportunity. Jump through that door. Nobody's going to stand against you. Even the Jews here who are standing against you, they have no power against you. Just keep in my word and keep doing the works.
Yeah, don't be ashamed to live the Christian life, right? And he also reminds them that he gives them access to the king's treasury, right? To have the key of David in the Old Testament would have meant you got the keys to the kingdom and you have access to everything. And for us as followers of Jesus, we know Paul lays out in Romans 8 as his children what we have access to now, and we have an inheritance waiting for us that there is there's no there's no shame even if the world brings it or if people bring it. There's no shame in knowing like this is who I am in Christ, and the life that he's calling me to live is totally worth it. And if I lose sight sometimes of what does it mean to live a holy and true life, then I look at Jesus, right? He's always our model, and maybe that is also part of what Jesus is wanting to remind them of, like, hey, keep your eyes on me, keep looking at me, keep living out the example you're living. You're on the right path here.
Yeah, and, Paul would say in Ephesians, I believe, according to the riches of his grace, right? And recognizing, he says here in verse 8, I know that you have but little power. That's in my understanding of this verse, that's a wonderful thing to know that I have very little strength to accomplish anything that God would have me to accomplish. And, they would say in the New Testament, like, I boast in my weakness, I glory in my weakness, because in my weakness, God's power is made manifest. It's perfectly manifested and so forth. And so, but I also love in this verse 8, right before that, he says, behold, I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. And I've had a number of conversations with people, specifically young adults, of just, wanting to do things for the Lord and like really searching for what that is, right? People talk about a calling and all this sort of thing. And I just think it's just very simple. God has set, he says to this church, I've set before you an open door. The thing that's right in front of you, walk in it, right? And for us, like, there's open doors right before our eyes all of the time to be a living witness for the risen Christ. And oftentimes we look for something else, as if there's another opportunity somewhere else. And so frequently it's just the Lord ministering to my heart of like, you don't need to go looking for other things. Look at what is right before you, right? You can be a witness to who I am and my great love for this world to your neighbor who literally lives 4 feet away from you, or to your peer in school who you sit next to in class every single day, or, whatever, go down the list, at work, your coworkers. Like, you don't need to look for something else. There is always an open door literally right before us that no one can shut.
And oftentimes people want something grander, right? They think that there's something, if you're following Jesus, you're going to have a giant church, or, you plug in whatever you'd be thinking. But we see in this passage that actually Christian success here is that they kept his word and they didn't deny his name. Those are the two things that are held up as the successful model for this church. It doesn't matter the other details, Jim, or like what you said, like, what does the Lord put in front of you, even if it's just your neighbor, like one person?
Yeah, exactly, Dan. I was just thinking the same thing. The Lord sees open doors so differently than we do. You might be at a job and you're like, I don't see this as an open door. I see this as like, I can't wait till I get a new job, or like, I'm tired of this. And the Lord sees it as an open door because he sees that one coworker who needs Jesus, who needs to be loved, or whatever. Like, the Lord sees things as open doors the way we don't. So to me, that's a great challenge to think like, Lord, is there an open door, quote unquote, in my life right now that help me not to neglect that, if that's a reality, because I'm so caught up in trying to find the right path, or I'm just so caught up in my own life or what I need to do or what makes me happy. Help me not to miss what might be an open door that maybe I'm not perceiving as an open door right now in my life.
Yeah, and I think in another vein related to the open door, we don't know exactly what this church was going through and what maybe perceived closed doors there would have been, but coming from the Holy and the True One who has the keys to the house of David, he has also set before them and us a door that no one can shut in relation to his eternal kingdom, right? Through faith in Christ, he has welcomed us into the household of God, and no one can take that away. Jesus would say in John chapter 10, no one can pluck you out of my hands. And so there's that stepping into the household of God. And then eschatologically, thinking about the things of the end times, which this letter will get into a little bit more specifically, I think, as we go through it. There's an entrance into perhaps the millennial kingdom that's referenced here, and all of these other great rewards and great blessings, right? That the one who holds the keys to the house of David says, no one can shut that. And so whatever you may be shut out of in this world as you pursue Christ in holiness and righteousness, there's something greater and grander that is open before you that no one can shut.
Yeah, in verse 12, just speaking to those who overcome, and again, those who overcome are, John says in 1 John, true believers, but here these true believers were faithful and obedient, and because of that, Jesus reminds them, I will make him a pillar in the temple of God, and he shall go out no more. And I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God and the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I will write on him my new name. Just that thought that you were bringing before us, Jim, of this open door into what he just said to them. This promise is no one can shut that. This is what's ahead of you. No matter what people say, no matter what persecution's going on around you, no matter how grand or boring you think your life is right now, your faithfulness, continue in that, and no one can take away the fact that this is in front of you. You are going to step into this one day. And along that way, he's reminding them that his name is on them, that they belong to him. And like you said, they can be secure in that, right? No one can take that away. When you want to make something seen as belonging to you, you write your name on it, right? If you don't want to lose it, you want people to know that it's yours, and so they don't steal it. You write your name on there, and it's kind of a similar idea, but a much more eternal and wonderful thought that Jesus would write his name on us, so everyone would know that we belong to him.
Yeah, and he goes on in 9. Behold, I'll make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they're Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I'll make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Why? He says in 10, because you have kept my word about patient endurance. I will then keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to try those who dwell upon the earth. So through this life, Josh, like you had mentioned, right, the name of Christ is written upon us. We are his, Peter would say. You are God's own possession, a holy nation, called out and so forth. And here he's like, there's these Jews who say they're Jews, but they're actually not. He says, I'm going to make them come and bow down before your feet. In other words, like, I will lift you up in due time. Humble yourselves before the mighty hand of the Lord, and I will exalt you in due time, it says in 1 Peter. And I'll keep you, because you have kept my word about patient endurance. Dan, you'd made mention earlier just about this small congregation having little power, but they are faithful to the things that God has entrusted unto them. And they're enduring, and they are patiently enduring, continuing on in their faithfulness, fidelity unto the Lord with whatever they have, with whatever open doors are before them. It's not grand, it's not huge, it's not hustling and bustling, maybe like the church in Ephesus, but God measures things differently than we do, and he's exalting them and saying, stay true to what you have started out in, and I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming. That is like, it's definitely coming, right? It's not a maybe or a what if. It is absolutely coming, and you will absolutely be kept from that hour, and it's coming upon the whole world. It's not a isolated event. This is something of huge magnitude, and it is intentioned to try those who dwell upon the earth. So there's something specific that the Lord is making reference to here, you know?
Yeah, and if you really want to dive in and do some studying, there is some, just for fun, there is some debate as to how verse 10 is interpreted, because that could change the way you view some of the events of the end times as far as when the rapture might happen, whether the church goes through the tribulation or not, because he says, keep you from the hour of trial. And a lot of people use that as an argument to say that that shows us the church will not be there in the hour of trial, because he seems to pretty clearly say from, not through the hour of trial, which, some people believe that the church will be there at least for the first half of the tribulation or all the way through it. So this is a pretty important verse and one that's good to dive into and study if you're kind of trying to sort out what you believe about the end times. The whole book of Revelation obviously will help you to formulate more of a crystallized idea of what you think you yourself and the church will have to endure when it comes to the end times. But this is definitely a verse to not miss.
Yeah, and we at Calvary Philly would certainly hold to a pre-tribulation rapture. We most certainly believe that the scriptures teach quite clearly that we will be spared from the wrath to come during the hour of tribulation, and this verse helps also support that. Megan mentioned, too, those who dwell upon the earth there at the end of verse 10 is mentioned a few times throughout the book of Revelation, and it's always contrasted with the people of God. It's always contrasted with those who have called upon the name of the Lord, this being the first reference to it. It's again found in chapter 6, verse 10, chapter 8, verse 13, chapter 11, verse 10, chapter 13, verse 8 and 14, and chapter 17, verse 8, all of which are during the tribulation period in the book of Revelation, chapters 16 through 19. You don't find them before that, and you don't find them after that. And it seems to indicate it is those who have tethered themselves to the things of this world. They have fixed their eyes and their hearts on this earth, as opposed to the new creation, the new heavens and the new earth, as opposed to the Lord, in essence. So it seems clearly in this verse, as far as I read it, that there's an hour of trial that is coming on the whole world. It's not isolated, and it is to try those who dwell upon the earth. And that seems to indicate clearly the tribulation period, which Paul tells us in Thessalonians, we're going to be spared from the wrath of God because of what Christ has done on our behalf. And this church in Philadelphia is admonished and said that they will be kept from that, Josh, like you said, as opposed to through it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we would certainly say this is a support for the rapture of the church before or pre-tribulation.
Yep. Yeah, in Revelation chapter 17, verse 8, that same phrase is used of those who dwell on the earth, and it's used in reference to those who are not in the book of life, which tells us, again, that if we look at the Old Testament and the story of the Bible, we believe that that tribulation period is going to be dealing with those who are Gentiles and dealing with the nation of Israel, not the church. However, when you look at Revelation chapter 17, verse 8, and you start to try to connect these ideas together, I think the main thing that we're looking at here is there's a contrast, like you said, Jim, between those who just love the things of the earth and the church in Philadelphia, which were people who were faithfully serving God and loved the things of eternity. They were not like those who, quote unquote, dwell on the earth. They were those who were walking with the Lord and loving the things of the Lord.
Yeah, they're categorized differently. They're in a completely different category of people. Mm-hmm. For sure. Yep. So again, then the obvious question becomes where is my heart? Where do I find myself, right? Am I tethered to the things of this world? Do I prioritize above God the things of this world? Or am I infused with a life that is looking to honor, glorify, and please the Lord?
Yeah.
In the things that he has bestowed upon me.
Yeah. And we know by God's grace, when you read on in the book of Revelation, there will be many people who are saved out of that time. Mm-hmm. So it's not just as if that whole period of time is those who are earth dwellers, who are rebellious against God, and God's just punishing them for 7 years. No, God is bringing judgment so that they might repent. And you see that word repent come up a number of times, and that's also that man would finally turn back to God. And we do see that many people will be saved during that tribulation period if you choose to continue reading on the book of Revelation.
Which we hope that you do.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then he emphasizes again in verse 11 right after that, I'm coming soon. That always that reminder of that it's going to be here quickly. So he tells them to hold fast.
Yeah.
Which we've talked about before, that holding on to something like your life depends on it. And he's telling them to hold fast to what they have, which was this opportunity that the Lord was putting before them to hold on to God, as we've been hinting at, that they were weak. They had a little bit of strength, and then their faithfulness to Jesus, his word, and not denying his name. And in doing so, it says that they're going to hold on to that crown. Like no one's going to seize it from them.
Yeah. The thing that I love about this letter too is that this to me shows us that God is very in tune with and invested in what's happening in our lives right now. Sometimes we can feel like God is, he's in heaven there waiting for us, and this life kind of stinks right now, and we just got to get through it, and then one day we'll be there in heaven with God. But he's talking about their situation in verse 9. He sees the things they're going through. He is giving them that promise of what's ahead, but he is very much aware of what they're going through in their lives. And there is a promise of future things in heaven, but there is also just a word of comfort that there is an element of eternity that we can be living in now. There you will have eternal peace and eternal security in heaven one day. But right now we can hold on to those things. That's what he's telling them. Hold fast to these things because you can experience peace, comfort, joy, the things that we find that are perfect in Christ. We can experience those things now in a very real way, and we will experience them perfectly one day. But yeah, just the reminder that whatever you are going through in life right now, however distant God might feel or the things of God, he is more aware of your situation than you even realize. And he is right in all the things that are going on in our lives.
Yeah. And again, the words of the holy and the true one says, hold fast, cling to. That is an action that we're to take. It's not, there are things in the scriptures that are done unto us and for us and on our behalf passively, that God just does it, and we ought to pray for those things, right? Lord, in 2 Thessalonians, Lord, direct my heart into the love of God and the patient endurance of Christ. That's something that we are seeking and asking for the Lord to do on our behalf. Enlarge my heart, Lord, to love you more. And then there are things that are very much active that we are to do, to cling to and hold fast to. And this is what he's saying unto us. God will do works in your life for sure, apart from what you're able to do as you recognize that you are poor in spirit, that you have little strength. And then there are things that we are to actively take hold of. The promises of God, the realities, the streams of mercy that he's put before us and step into. And somewhere in all of that, God meets us and bestows upon us that which he desires to, related to his riches and grace.
Yeah, and if we look at our lives in a very honest way, how often do we cling to the things of this world more tightly than we're clinging to the eternal things and the Lord just on a daily basis? Our minds and our hearts are so wrapped around our routines and the things we want to do. And the Lord is just so graciously inviting these churches and us over and over again to, as you're saying, Jim, hold tightly to me and to my word and to prayer and the first works, right? Hold tightly to those things. And this is such a great reminder for all of us. You know?
And when it's all fully consummated, right? When God establishes his kingdom in all of its entirety, we're going to look back and be like, I'm glad I clung to the crown and the New Jerusalem and the name of God, as opposed to the things of this earth. When it's all said and done, it will be fully worth it, And I don't want to be standing there in that day saying, I wish I had clung to the things of God and I didn't. And therefore, maybe however all that works out, I miss out on some of the things, the rewards that I could have had if I'd lived my life in fidelity to the Lord.
Yeah. And the fact that these people in this church did it is today memorialized in Revelation chapter 3 as an example to us. Yeah. So not only do we hold on to the things of the Lord for our own individual benefit, but for the benefit of others, because we can be an example to those around us and those who come after us if we're walking things out the way that we should. So I think, that's something definitely to remember as well, that Jesus was an example to us. The people we read about in Scripture are an example to us, and we can turn around and be an example to people around us too. Well, good talk, Philadelphia. Yeah. Love it. If you guys have questions about the church in Philadelphia, either past or present, or Philly Young Adults Ministry, send us an email at ya@ccphilly.org. You can send us a message in the show notes. Make sure you leave some contact info so we can get back to you there, or hit us up on Instagram at Philly Young Adults CC. And we will see you guys next time for the concluding letter in the 7 letters to the churches.
Peace.
Peace.